Welcome to Implicating the Real. Today's show is part 2 of the conversation began in the previous episode. Let's get right into it. Hope you enjoy. All right, jumping back in, we got session 546. Gets right into the heaven and hell beliefs and suicides. Anyone have anything they want to start off with there?
I thought it was funny. It makes so much more sense. It makes sense. It's a throwaway line, but it's one that I think is something that people have thought about a lot. The idea that if you were to go to a traditional heaven, the way that people imagine it, you'd get very bored.
Yeah.
You could not be there for very long before you'd be like, I'm tired of this.
I'll read the whole paragraph. A belief in heaven or hell under certain conditions can be equally disadvantageous. Some will refuse to accept the idea of further work, development, and challenge. I thought that was funny too. It's like a petulant little toddler, refusing to.
Heaven's for the lazy.
Just folding their arms across their chest and saying no. Believing instead that conventional heaven situations are the only possibility. For some time, they may indeed inhabit such an environment until they learn through their own experience that existence demands development and that such a heaven would be sterile, boring, and indeed deadly. In quotes. That just makes some sense to you? I'm asking you because you're kind of the first time reader of this. How does that strike you as it's just that our imagination of heaven, isn't thought through in a sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's a pretty widely held impression of heaven in the traditional sense. I think most people that think about it a little bit in our culture nowadays would agree with that, where they're yeah, heaven does sound kind of boring.
Yeah.
Where I think people who are believers nowadays have to sort of do more work to give an explanation of why it wouldn't be. And I think a lot of them do that for themselves, right? Where they're oh no, it's more about spiritual fulfillment and oneness with God and blah, blah, blah. It's not just you get to go and it's just everything's nice. And you just lay on a really nice sofa all day long and just hang out, even though, earlier in religious traditions, that's literally the imagery people would talk about, right? Is just being in a paradise all the time.
The absurdity of our depictions of heaven is kind of a clue to this, right?
Yeah.
When you think about it, whether it is, just lounging around on clouds and everyone's wearing white clothes or something for some reason, or it's this many virgins. How absurd are these ideas of heaven, right?
I love that one so much.
Yeah. How do they get to the specific number?
True, yeah. Right?
I guess it depends on how many righteous deeds you've done on earth, probably.
Well, there's an ideal number of virgins, because if it's too many, it's the correct amount.
Oh man,
it just also it reminds me of I think that I've only heard this secondhand. I haven't read it primary, so forgive me for that. But I think there's a whole Nietzsche thing about it, where he talks about, because he's really critical of the Christian depiction of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at one point he talks about the thing that people who are excited to go to heaven for isn't the paradise and the happiness that you get in heaven. It's not worth anything unless you get to look at the people in hell and see that they're suffering.
You gotta look down on something.
Yeah.
There is a really good quote about something like that. I can't think of it.
Because I think he references even an earlier Christian writer. I don't want to try to name drop because I don't know which one it was, but it was one of the church fathers or whatever. And someone had wrote to him do people in heaven get to see the experience of people in hell? And the church father basically is well, of course, if you couldn't, there'd be no point, this is the whole point.
So they're all just sadistic and just enjoy watching people.
They just enjoy watching people suffer and be I'm so much holier than thou, literally, right? What? And that's the Nietzsche thing where he's just is this really psychologically the type of person you'd want to be?
Yeah. That's hilarious. All right, so the flip side of that, others may insist that because of their transgressions, they will be cast into hell. And because of the force of such belief, they may for some time actually encounter such conditions. In either case, however, there are always teachers available. They try to get through these false beliefs. In the Hades conditions, the individual will come somewhat more quickly to their senses. Their fears trigger within themselves the answering release. Their need, in other words, more quickly opens up the inner doorways of knowledge. Their state does not usually last long, therefore, as the heaven state. Also makes sense to me is like, if you're like creating your own reality and you're creating hell for yourself, you rather quickly come to your senses.
I thought that was very funny. You quickly get tired of it and you're like, this sucks.
And I like this idea, like their need, in other words, more quickly opens up the inner doorways of knowledge. And he talks about this inner doorways maybe later in this chapter too, but like just this idea that it's like, you always have this there. You always have this availability.
Mm-hmm.
But this would be akin to what we were talking about earlier when we we're talking about sterile lives and you need like a wake-up call, something to kind of shock you out of your malaise or whatever. And in this case, it would be more than malaise, I guess. And then he gets into suicides, and he says, suicides as a class, for example, do not have any particular punishment meted out to them, nor is their condition any worse a priori. They are treated as individuals. Any problems that were not faced in life will, however, be faced in another one.
I think it's very interesting.
Yeah.
How suicides get talked about. Like, I'm always very interested in like how people who, I wouldn't even say like intellectual people, but like people who have a following talk about suicide. Because I think like in our culture nowadays, we're very like self-conscious about it. We're like, if you are like a social media like personality and you're talking about suicide, like one, you have to do the stupid thing, right? Where you self-censor yourself by being like committing not alive anymore, right? But like there's the second self-censorship thing of being like, you cannot be seen to be giving a neutral or an approving or even neutral stance towards it because of like the potential liability.
Yeah.
Right? Where it's like you have to be like, it's bad, don't do it.
Well, yeah, you get to the point where your own self-interests like are dictated by this legal framework or this fear.
Yeah.
Through which the legal framework like advises you to like tiptoe around certain issues.
And even if it's not the legal framework, just like the understanding of like, oh, the things that I say about this may be interpreted by people who are not psychologically well to mean things that I don't mean, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, it's tricky.
So it's always interesting to see like, how does someone comport themselves when talking about suicide? And I thought it was really interesting in this chapter that like, Jane really just kind of is like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's not bad. Like, you can kind of do it and get away. Like, because there's the part where, you know, Seth's like, yeah, a lot of times, like, people do it, and then people be like, oh, that was an oopsie, and they'll erase your memory and just, like, stick you back in the reality, you know?
What you say it?
Yeah.
Stick you back.
Like, hey, you weren't done. Get back in there. You're only half cooked, you know? Like, you're not done yet.
I mean, the reason a lot of those people on social media have to censor themselves is the AI that looks through the transcript will just remove the whole video if they catch you saying that.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
That's why they do it, and they, other words get censored too, like
Mhm.
kill or murder. But back then, Seth wasn't using someone else's platform. Like nowadays, people have to rely on TikTok or YouTube. They can't just have if they could have their own website, but they wouldn't have the organic like reach that these other platforms provide you. But if they had their own organic website, they could just say these things openly. Like I'm sure that in many churches around the country, pastors openly say suicide.
Yeah.
It's just like a limitation of the times.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure, but it sounds like it's not just like Western Christian culture that has this idea that there is a special punishment for suicides. And I'm thinking like, what? How did we get there? And it
I
must
think
be
it's because when people are suicidal, you really have to like tell them whatever the heck you got to tell them to make them not do that. Like we lie to kids about Santa Claus just to like bait them into behaving.
I think that's part of it, but like from like a strictly religious standpoint, they're probably thinking like, this life is such a beautiful gift and you're rejecting it. How dare you reject it? You get a
Yeah.
special punishment, you know? I wonder if it came from that place too.
I don't know. That just makes me think of all like the religious rules that we once had that had a practical reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jewish people aren't allowed to eat pork because at some point it was dangerous because of the parasites in pork, or they weren't allowed to eat like shellfish because at some point that was like really dirty, and just food poisoning would result.
Yeah. And then some other meaning got attached to it and it carries forward in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, I think you do have the point, right? Where it's like, if you're actually trying to talk somebody out of committing suicide, it's like you will say whatever the hell you need to, like
Right.
in a moment.
Exactly.
Like you can't do that, you know?
Yeah. The stakes are high. Suicide has always been, I think it just automatically comes with an air of mystery and fascination because often it'll happen in a way that leaves everybody else with all these questions, you know? And so it just has this mystique around it, you know, for better or worse.
But the truth is, like Seth says, that every death is consented to. So if you choose to die by a car accident or you choose to die from cancer, it was still your choice.
Mhm.
And like the single line of consciousness,
Yeah.
current thinking that, you know, most of society has is that those deaths were not chosen. That's just exterior events that happen to you.
Right.
But in the framework of you create your own reality, you know, all deaths are chosen, but no one is like, why did she die of cancer? No, it's why did she kill herself? You know, through suicide.
Yeah.
Not that we have to like get into this, but do you remember somewhere Seth saying, because this maybe is a little controversial, but like that children can't commit suicide? Do you remember hearing?
I don't remember that.
Huh.
But I mean, I'm not.
I mean,
But-
I feel like if you talk to anyone who's around children pretty often, they'll confirm this. Children are constantly trying to kill themselves. Like literally, it's their favorite activity.
Basically, that's what parenting is, right? Is preventing kids from, you know, running into the highway.
Yeah, no, they're
Silly.
very creative.
Yeah, that was just like, I don't know, something that I remember like coming across that in book club or something and it being a little bit of a eye-opening, controversial kind of statement.
So if like we're in a context where like all deaths are consented to anyways, like what's going on when you have to like physically instantiate it by like your activities, right? Like what we would call suicide, you know? Like why couldn't you just be like, oh yeah, like there's gonna be this anvil that falls out of the sky and smashes me and it'll be really funny. Like why would somebody go to the extent of being like, well no, I have to do it in this way?
Because they believe that they have to do it in that way.
Yeah.
I do think that people can literally just lay down and die. Because it happens so often where like someone's spouse will die and they'll just die shortly afterwards. Or their child will die and they'll just die of heartbreak. Like doctors in medical school, they taught us like, yeah, there is that phenomenon that some people just die of heartbreak where their life is just so crappy that they die even though like their organs, their system was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it's always a choice, but like someone in that deep level of despair and hopelessness where they are having suicidal tendencies, I think that they just don't think that there's any other way out. They don't think that they feel so out of control with their own physical life that of course they're not thinking from the mental level of I create my own reality and I have so much control over my life that I can decide to die in a car accident or die in a way that won't be so disturbing to my family.
So do you think that decision comes from like the higher like meta level?
The decision to die?
The decision to like kill yourself?
Well, I think the way Seth would explain it, whenever, you know, again, they're like kind of heated. There's a lot of tension around like, how dare you believe this because, you know, so-and-so died and they didn't choose, you know, like
Right.
you get confronted with a lot of intense emotions when these ideas come up. But when that's been brought up to Seth, I remember him explaining like, there's like multiple reasons why it looks a certain way, you know, like in the case of like a murder, you know, the person murdering has their own reasons for going their route, you know? And so like maybe a suicide, you know, maybe it's a statement that that personality wanted to make to their parents
Mm-hmm.
or their protest. Like a lot of times stuff is like a protest to conditions. And I think it's a fact of this existence that, you know, once your life no longer has meaning, no longer have the avenues to pursue value fulfillment, you do die. Like this is, if you're familiar with Viktor Frankl's work, he was in Auschwitz. He was a psychologist that lived through Auschwitz, and he was noting that people that like had something to live for, the idea that their child might be alive or whatever it might be, they survived on impossibly low amounts of nutrition, where other people that had no meaning, like they didn't last 3 days, and like that seems like, for all its horror, that was like a definitive like scientific statement about like how meaning affects your ability to just exist.
Right.
Man's Search for Meaning is the book.
Yeah.
His main book.
Plus, like Seth says, that you can cure yourself. You can have health. You don't have to die from illness. He says that disease or illness is always a dis-ease of the mind. It's always some issue that you're not facing. But ultimately, and of course, if that is correct, then it's true that everyone has free will, because if anyone dies from an illness, then it's because they chose not to fix the issue.
And the opposite is true too, and we're going to get into this, but like he's saying the people that reincarnate too quickly is because there's almost like an impulsivity or obsession with meaning. Life is so meaningful that they're not detaching in a healthy way from their previous life. They're jumping right back into it naively.
Right.
So it's really interesting to think of like life and this connection with meaning.
Michael, I found it. It's in the Early Sessions, book 3. And again, it's like, because of copyright issues, the search engine only gives me this paragraph, so I can't see the rest of the context. It says, "No child, no infant commits suicide. It is impossible. The adult who commits suicide has still gained experience to some degree within your plane. This law, the necessity for experience, operates only after complete materialization and orientation within your plane."
So it must be, it makes me think, is it the part of childhood that like we kind of lose memory with, lose touch with? Like once you kind of like orientate yourself into this like adult life, you could still technically be like a child. You might be 12 or something, but like you've developed this, I mean, can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, no child, no infant commits suicide. It is impossible. The adult who commits suicide has still gained experience to some degree within your plane. This law, the necessity for experience, operates only after complete materialization and orientation within your plane.
Necessity for experience. So he's kind of saying like there needs to be some level of a certain kind of experience before you can kill yourself.
Well, because like, I suppose it might make sense just under the idea of like, if I were to, come upon a child that has like done something to cause their own death to happen, like, I don't think I would ever assume that they did so on purpose.
Yeah.
Like, even if a kid literally is like bashing themselves with something or like jumping out of a window or something, it's like they don't, I feel like most kids just like don't have the capacity to understand that will end their life, Maybe
that's a critical distinction too, because again, we kind of brought it up, like we don't want to offend anybody, and maybe there's examples out there of like some very young person dying. I don't want to offend anyone, but like maybe the distinction is that it's not a suicide. They didn't intend to like off themselves. It's like an accident, based on ignorance or something.
Right.
Right.
Although I do want to say this is session number 95. So it's really early on and there might be distortions.
Okay.
But I just remembered, and this might contradict what I said earlier, there was a couple, like parents of a young boy who came to Jane and Rob. I think they were grieving the death of their son. I don't think he ever got older than 12. Maybe he died sooner. But I wish I remember more details. But Seth basically told him, like, your son has been with you through a lot of incarnations, and you guys have forgotten what it meant to live joyously and like more childlike with more adventure. And he came to remind you of that, but he came intentionally with that illness because he did not intend to stay for a long time. And he's okay. He just came to like teach you guys that lesson, and now you guys are messed up and super grieving. But like that wasn't what he came here for, and it wasn't supposed to be this horrible thing that happened to you.
I would love to get an update on how those people responded to Seth's information right there. Like, did they take it in hard and actually like?
I think about that so much,
Yeah.
Michael. But the thing is, like, Rob would obfuscate the names sometimes,
Yeah.
and so I'm like, I don't even know if anyone has any record of what the real names were
Yeah.
at this point.
I remember Seth, explaining even like, like stillborn babies and stuff, like just like, whatever person wanted, just like to dip their toe in the water basically. And then it's a very traumatic experience for the mother and the father, right? So like
Yeah,
this is all part of the explanation of like what you were asking earlier. Like everyone has their own reasons for their own part in these experiences. And so like we don't have that insight. So that's why it's like so illuminating when Seth can, just take an example like this and give us all the different angles.
Right.
I want to say something about that stillbirth, kind of relevant. This might not have very much context, but he's talking about Jane, I think. He says a miscarriage later on the part of Rupert's mother represented an entity who changed his mind, so to speak.
Ha! Oh, changed your mind.
Well, he says free will is always operating, so yeah, why not?
Yeah, and then later on, like a paragraph later, Rob asks, because Jane had a miscarriage, why did Jane have her miscarriage? And Seth says, Rupert's miscarriage was a result of something else entirely. This time you're both on your last reincarnation of cycle on your plane, and as a rule, no personality fragments are left behind.
Oh yeah, because there's that thing of like on your last reincarnation, people don't have kids.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a hard and fast rule. Like, I wish that I could ask that, because he definitely said that about Jane and Rob specifically, but I don't know if that applies to everyone.
And the term personality fragments, I wonder if that goes like, does that go beyond children, or is that, I mean, could you have a child that isn't a personality fragment of yourself? Probably not. I don't know.
Didn't he also say that his dog, Seth's dog, was a personality fragment?
Seth did say, yeah, he was currently, as he was dictating a dog somewhere, but he wouldn't tell Seth and Jane where.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want them to like
Go find the dog.
Yeah.
And plus, he was so like detached from that dog that when they asked him later, like, how's the dog doing? He was like, well, give me a second. Like, he's not just hyper aware of it. And he was like, oh, the dog is gone. As if he didn't know that. Like, so.
Yeah.
What is a personality fragment?
Good question.
Like, why are kids because aren't kids like just someone else's like soul or entity or whatever?
I think there might be some like overlapping happening, it's like a different entity taking birth, but like by virtue of coming through DNA of these two other people, there's like this new person, this new outer ego is going to have some like overlap,
I want to say something from this chapter, actually, that might answer your question, because I was wondering the same thing. He said, he's just talking about the Raminkin, or one of his European lives. Seth says, this was my last full reincarnation. Adopted in because I love to see, yada yada. Frank Withers was a fragment personality of mine, as if to imply that full reincarnation is the opposite of a fragment personality. And then he says he will continue himself to reincarnate and go his own way. Many of us leave fragment personalities as you leave children.
Right. Well, because Frank Withers was like the first like name that Seth gave of when he got in contact.
Yeah, and I think he explained elsewhere that was because chronologically, Frank Withers was the closest to Jane. Like, he lived in the 1950s or something, 60s, something like that. It was in that century.
But Frank Withers was like an entire like person who had a whole life.
Yes.
And like lived a whole life.
Yeah.
But like that was only a fragment personality.
Mm-hmm.
And was he a fragment because Seth only needed this one aspect? I'm just speculating.
I don't.
Yeah, because like he needed humility, right?
Yes.
And maybe like beyond a fragment, there's a more comprehensive need or more happening there.
This is verging on like NPC theory territory.
Yeah. Yeah, we're just speculating.
What percentage of people in the world are mere fragment personalities as opposed to us full reincarnation?
Gotta be careful. I mean, Seth can talk crap about Frank Withers, but we can, you know.
That's okay. I'm a fragment personality. Any listeners,
I don't know,
if
Joe.
you're a fragment personality, then you have representation on this podcast. You're seen.
That's hilarious.
I was only put on this earth so my entity could learn humility.
That might be a tough life if that's all you're learning.
Yeah, dude.
But yeah, maybe it's a nice starting point. Like your next life, you like, you know, it's not nothing.
Oh, I decided next life I'm a tree. Oh, I thought this was an interesting thing.
Go for it.
Was this the same page as the suicide thing? I think it was pretty close to it. There's like an interesting thing. It was just sort of a throwaway line. But there was also the thing where Seth was just talking about how like people get a little too like attached to like their life and where is it? Oh yeah, people don't recognize like their death.
Yeah.
And they like stick around for too long.
Mm.
Yeah, which maybe explains some of our ideas of like ghosts.
Yeah, it like the framework was interesting to me because it sort of set it up where like ghosts and suicides are like opposites of each other. Where like a ghost is someone who didn't realize that they died, and a suicide is someone that didn't realize they were not supposed to die. Because he talks about like going and like re-editing the suicide as if it didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
So like the implication is that there's like a number of us who like have committed suicide at some point already, and then we went back and were like, no, actually, like I'm gonna just wake up as if I just like took a nap or something. And then like everyone around them's like, okay, cool. Like we'll just, yeah, you can keep going like in this reality, you know?
The idea that it's like too traumatic to acknowledge that you've done something. Like if you have these like strong beliefs about like the immorality of committing suicide.
Yeah.
You think it's just, you're done. It's over. You've like, you don't have to deal with anything more. But the fact that your existence keeps going, you have to find a way to like consciously deal with the fact that you did this thing that you believe is immorally wrong.
Right.
So they have to like kind of ease you along with your beliefs and then pull you aside and say, hey, got some bad news.
Yeah, right.
At the point where it's not so bad to you, you know,
Right.
your beliefs have changed.
Yeah.
I was thinking in the sense that all this made me think that one way to describe death is it's like a forced application of like, this is a time where you have to like change your beliefs, you know, unless you get into these like actual reality of these beliefs. But like, that's mostly what's happening here. Like no matter which sort of death and which sort of choices you're coming upon, like death is like, okay, this is a time where you have to like reevaluate things.
Yeah, I think most like traditions, people see it as like death is a transformative experience. Like you cannot escape the fact that like you need to change through it. You can't just continue existing through your death, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously a change from, you know, this environment, right? But like just psychologically, like more than that, it's just like a letting go of beliefs. Like it's almost like letting go of this environment and this life is almost just a set of beliefs, you know, like there's no distinction.
That's a good transition to the next part. As we talk about like the binary beliefs.
Yeah.
And how like you really like Seth says like a really big part of this is like you have to be able to let go of like binaries. And like the first one that he talks about actually is like gender binary, where it's like some people have a really difficult time apparently like after they're dead they have to let go of the fact like I was a man or I was a woman.
Yeah.
Because it's like in soul or whatever, like those things don't exist.
An overly strong identification with the sexual characteristics can also hold back progress. He doesn't go into it too much more deeply here.
It's sort of just a throwaway.
I mean, I think for a lot of people, this is just kind of obvious, but obviously for a lot of people, it's not that obvious.
Well, I feel like there was a whole part of like the New Age movement that saw like gendered souls, you know? Like people really did like try to be like, no, like as a man or as a woman, I have this like specific spiritual purpose, you know?
Yeah.
Or like my soul is gendered, you know, in a certain way.
Isn't a lot of, I feel like it's come up a lot that like Jane has a little more masculine leanings.
That's
like
why.
she's almost sexist towards women in some ways.
Yeah. But
I don't-
it's also why she identifies as like, well, it's why Rupert is male.
yeah.
Because overall, Jane is more masculine.
No, that had me thinking a lot. Whereas like from the meta perspective of like just like the Jane like channeling Seth as a phenomenon, as like it made me wonder about like Jane's sort of relationship with gender, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like if we see this as like a performance art thing, like clearly there's a choice that Jane's making to be like, I want to present, like we were talking about, when we were on the break, where it's like she'll like position herself in like a much more masculine sort of like sitting arrangement, like when channeling, and like speak much more directly.
I think that's because it's Seth positioning himself like that.
Right. Yeah. But like if we're a little skeptical about Seth, like
I see.
identity, it's like
Okay.
there's still an interesting story to tell about like Jane is using this sort of like other like gender sort of like presentation,
Yeah. It's interesting. And it's hard even to remember that Seth isn't strictly masculine because of our associations with that name, So, I mean, these things are just part of what we're dealing with at this level.
Yeah.
I actually asked Rick once, but I don't remember his answer. I told him, and this is related to what you were saying earlier when you mentioned like when we were trying to remember other entity names that Seth said. At that point, I mean, this is like over a year ago. I said to Rick, like, look, there are all these entities. We have Rupert and Joseph and this, that, and the other. They're all male. And I asked him, did Seth ever mention any female entities at all? Because I was like, why are they all male? And I don't remember what he said. But, like, do you ever remember Seth mentioning any female, like, any person having a female entity? Because I don't.
I feel like I asked that once too, and maybe there was one. I don't know.
The token girl. I just like hang out with guys. I'm not like all the other girl entities.
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe it's because everyone who showed up to Jane's class basically was Sumari.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe males tend to be Sumari.
Or are we getting back to that, why is Seth named Seth, sort of thing? And like, is there some sort of like connection? Because like we're coming out of like a patriarchy. Like Seth will talk about this when we get into like the Christ chapter and stuff, that like that culture wouldn't have accepted like the idea of a Messiah being a woman.
Right.
And is it sort of the same phenomenon? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's so interesting to wonder, like, if Seth were channeled 2050, would all the entities be female?
Yeah.
Right.
We're always coming up with way more questions than answers. That's good though. Says those who understand thoroughly that reality is self-created will have least difficulty. Those who have learned to understand and operate in the mechanics of the dream state will have great advantage. That's kind of the message of this whole chapter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes into a systemized theology of opposites is also detrimental. If you believe, for example, that all good must be balanced by evil, then you will bind yourself into a system that is highly limiting and contains within it seeds of great torment. That last part, seeds of great torment, I think we can see that if we like flesh this idea out as it's, informed our own culture.
Yeah, I was wondering to what extent it informs our culture nowadays. Because I assume that it did more then, but I suppose maybe we're just in a privileged position in our society.
I think we're still a very intellectually heavy culture more than like intuitive. I think we're coming out of these ideas. We're moving more into like reformation than punishment, but like we're still in that transition,
Some would say we're backsliding.
We're moving in all different directions, but like, yeah, I feel like the overall direction is begrudgingly being positive, but I don't know.
Well, because like Seth wants to talk about this idea essentially of like assuming that good implies evil, that like for goods to exist, evils have to exist.
Yeah.
Which I wonder, like, I don't know what percentage of people believe that, Like, I feel like the people that I interact with generally don't believe in the idea of evil.
Really?
Yeah. Like, I think a lot of our culture is utilitarian,
When Seth says evil, what comes to mind isn't like Satan or like the fire of Hades. What comes to mind is people doing everyday stuff like saying this politician is bad, that person is just bad, this killer is just a bad person, so and so is a narcissist and gaslights and is therefore just bad. It's like, or from the Sethian point of view, they are toddlers, they're really new gods who are just really ignorant and blundering their way through life. And it looks like they're hurting people, but when you realize that this is like a board game and we're all eternal, is it really that bad if I accidentally flick your piece?
Right.
Well,
So it's like,
and by labeling somebody bad or evil, that allows us to do evil things to them. You know, they need to be punished. We have the death penalty in this country, right?
right.
Like it's just that idea. And I think when he's talking about this idea of like theology of opposites, I think like he's meaning like literally like the fabric of reality in this belief is like a balance of forces of good and evil.
Yeah, it has like a Zoroastrian like aspect to it,
Yeah.
where it's
And
just like
so,
very black and white, good
and that's why it's like insidious, you know, like that's why this term like seeds of torment kind of like makes sense to me. Cause like you don't really see how it grows into this thing, but like, you know, like we're fighting wars constantly in this world. Like great horrors are happening like right now.
right.
And to me, the evil is the justifications we use to get there. Like it's literally, it's so absurd. Like we have to create hell so we don't create hell.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we have to kill these people and then everything's going to be, you know, paradisal.
Yeah.
But like you're literally creating the opposite.
Right.
It's such an absurd hypocrisy, you know.
So the read I got from what you were saying was that like our evil should be thought of as sort of like someone's like inherent nature. Like that's what like we read evil as, is like claiming that someone is inherently bad as opposed to just like doing a bad thing.
It's hard for me to define because I am one of those people who no longer believes that evil exists. It's not a thing. So if you're going to tell me, okay, opposites is just there's the law of opposites. So there are foxes, there must be an anti-fox. There's
Right.
this black ghost that goes around blipping foxes out of existence, and we'd be like, what? That doesn't exist. Like it. Okay, so like we have wars, which to us we think is atrocious. If you're in a daycare and some kid just rips a teddy bear out of some little girl's hand, are you going to be like, and then the little girl starts crying and is obviously in a lot of emotional torment because that's her toy, are you going to say that boy is evil?
Right.
How absurd would it be if I'm like, this kid is freaking evil? No, he's just a kid. He's just as ignorant as the politician who's doing all this really dumb stuff that results in what we think is atrocities. But I don't think that guy wakes up in the morning and thinks, you know what? I really want to be an asshole today. I'm just gonna be evil. Like I've always wanted to be like those villains in the movies. They're doing what they think is the best, however misguided.
Right.
But I don't like, just as no sane person would say this child is evil for doing something that minor. I just don't ascribe evilness to human action at all. I think all of it comes from some sort of ignorance. You never know what that person went through and what sort of religious beliefs or just regular beliefs they have.
Mm-hmm.
In some sense, it's like kind of a cop out because it's easier to shoot someone that you identify as like an enemy or someone that's doing something wrong than it is to like try to teach them, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
it's that's an understatement. Like it's so much harder to like get to change someone's mind than it is to just like
Eliminate them.
yeah.
Yeah. Right.
but and like weirdly enough, I also think it's so much harder to live with the idea that evil is a real thing because, like Seth says, it contains within it the seeds of great torment. Like back when I used to think that the world was such a worse, darker place, when I truly thought that there were evil people that are just villainous. But nowadays, I just see it as like varying degrees of ignorance and learning, and that the people we think are truly evil, like Putin, they are a circumstance of the times that we chose, that we mass chose to reincarnate and to learn specific lessons. Like, I'm not going to be like, organic chemistry is evil for being this freaking hard. Like, how dare the universe invent these molecules that have these rules? Like, oh man, like, no, it's just a thing that I chose to take, to learn.
We just lost all the OChem students. They're like, no, you forgot how bad it is.
Oh, I also hated OChem, but like, yeah, that sucked.
Yeah, I couldn't even really get into it in the first place. Yeah, and so like the Putins of the world can be contemporaneous with people who don't believe that evil exists, and that allows, I think, anyone who believes that to like actually live like personally untouched. Like they don't have to, according to a Seth philosophy, like they don't have to live in fear that like those entities are a danger to us in this lifetime. You know, you can live in a war zone and not be personally affected through the reality you're creating. It's probably pretty crazy. Do you have all this chaos around you? Well, that's what Seth says. I don't know. I mean, these are like some of the most challenging aspects, but like to me, it makes sense. It's consistent with his message. You know,
Maybe it might be easier to understand that a lot of people did live through COVID in America and were completely unaffected. Like they didn't know anyone who got sick or died.
Yeah. No, and I don't doubt that. I think there are, like, I've heard stories of people like there's a lot of joy that people find like in a war zone, right? In a disaster. Like the human spirit is stronger than any of those circumstances. It's just, I wonder if it's possible to be entirely detached from the experience while also being joyful, you know?
well, and it's not necessarily all one thing, right?
Yeah.
Like you could get some meaningful experiences where, you know, maybe, you know, your second cousin gets killed in the war, but like basically, you know, like most of your loved ones are intact and you still have this like normative, meaningful life,
Mm-hmm.
even though you live in this part of the world.
Right. I really like this phrase. Where is it? So sort of describing the like better like sort of view that a person should have. It's like right here it says, quite simply, a belief in the good without a belief in the evil may seem highly unrealistic to you. This belief, however, is the best kind of insurance that you can have both during physical life and afterward. I just like that phrase, belief in good without belief in evil.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what he's getting at from what we were just saying.
I will say it's worked out very well for me. It's a lot lower stress to live this way.
You can have some empathy of how we got caught up into this idea of opposites because we can always compare. There's always comparatively evil from any, you know, instantiation of good, right? And so we can conclude from that. Like there's always, you know,
'Cause that's
better or worse. But like to like stretch that theory out and say, therefore, good and evil both exist.
Yeah, that's
Where you go wrong.
That's why I always like using the word like bad, right? Instead of evil. Because it's like there's good and there's not good. Like good and not good could be bad. But like evil seems qualitatively different. you know?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think bad also can be like conflated with evil pretty easily, though.
Yeah, I think people, when they're not being careful, do that a lot.
A lot of times I find myself saying something like, well, it's not ideal.
It's not ideal, yeah.
I say that too.
It's not
Yeah.
ideal.
It's kind of funny, isn't it? But I mean, that's the way of like, you know, expressing that without, you know, having that seed of torment built into your language.
Mm-hmm. That classic Midwestern stoicism. Well, it's different.
Yeah. Should we try to hit some highlights and breeze through the rest of this chapter?
Sure.
How about this? Your world has not tried the experiment as yet which would release you. Christianity was but a distortion of this main truth. That is, organized Christianity as you know it. I am not simply speaking here of the original precepts. They were hardly given a chance, and we will discuss some of this later in the book. The experience that would transform your world would operate upon the basic idea that you create your own reality according to the nature of your beliefs, and that all existence was blessed, and that evil did not exist in it. These ideas were followed individually and collectively. Then the evidence of your physical senses would find no contradiction. They would perceive the world and existence as good. This experiment has not been tried, and these are the truths that you must learn after physical death.
I just want to say he said the experiment that would transform your world, not the experience.
Oh, sorry.
That's all.
Yeah. The part that I really underlined there is then the evidence of your physical senses would find no contradiction. So we could literally, in that sense, have a science that confirms this if we had the beliefs that created the reality.
I suppose so. I wonder at that point what the value of the observations would be.
Well, to get to that point, you have to like devalue, the supremacy of everything coming through the senses, right?
Right.
You're already kind of understanding that, your beliefs are creating reality.
Yeah.
But for those people that are kind of a little on the fence, it'll tug them in the right direction, if you're buying this.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you, Joe, before we got into that chapter, like, what do you think, kind of putting you on the spot here, that Seth says about Christianity and Christ?
Oh, are we gonna get there soon?
I mean, maybe not soon, but, in the second half of this book.
I mean, we already talked about it a little bit, right? Okay, so past episodes, so Christ was like one of the he's like one of those like people who like knows they're an entity or something, right? Isn't there like a thing where people like decide to incarnate, but they know already that they're an entity, and they're like, I'm here to do a job, I'm here to get a thing done.
I think you're on the right track, yeah.
So it's like, yeah. And we said that there's like multiple like instances that Seth talks about of these. And there's one like a really, really long time ago, I thought. That sounds kind of funny. But like, I assume that's what it has to be. Because then you can just like, I don't know. Like in terms of like miracles and stuff, I assume that would have to be like a collective agreement thing where like everyone's just like who's participating has to be like, no, we're all gonna like do this like little song and dance thing. So like maybe he's like a art collective project, like a bunch of entities got together and they're like, you're gonna be this guy, but then we're all gonna be your followers and we're all gonna do all this shit, and it's gonna be like a performance piece,
I like how you're like really thinking of it as, from this like time of choosing perspective where they're like planning it out.
Yeah, right.
I think you got some,
We're
that's like
getting there.
decent guess based on, the elements that we have in place. I think there'll still be some surprises for you, but we should leave it at that for time.
Yeah, listener, be ready for that episode. It will come to you like a thief in the night, listener.
He briefly mentioned a system that's not connected with ours that's much more advanced. Did you guys pick up on that one?
What's this?
There are systems of probability not connected with your own system at all, much more advanced than you presently imagine. And in these, the truths of which I have been speaking are well known. In them, individuals creatively and purposely create realities, knowing how to do so and giving full rein to the creative abilities of consciousness. I mention this here simply to point out that there are many other after-death conditions not connected with your system. So he's just like telling you, like, there are other existences where they're like kind of nailing it. You guys could get there if you got your shit together. That's what I got from that.
I figure that's first grade if we're in kindergarten.
Yeah. I like that. It's not second grade, it's first grade.
I think about that a lot when I'm struggling with like beliefs creating reality. I'm like, how did I make this happen? And then I think about these people who are just like beyond this, and I'm like, come on,
Yeah.
get your shit together, Liana.
They're just all partying. They're like, our reality rocks. And you're like, oh no. I will say this to you guys and the listener, like one of the greatest things I've gotten from coming across this material, and we talked about this briefly last time, like this idea of like whether or not something's true, you can kind of like believe something and get something out of it. But like anytime something upsetting or bad or not ideal happens to me, I'll stop and because of this material, I'll say like, why did I choose this? And it's so insightful.
Mhm.
To like, just to think of ways that like, oh, chose this because I needed to learn this lesson. It's because I had all these opportunities to acknowledge this truth that I need to know, but I decided to look past it. Like it's that experience over and over again. It's where like, oh, I could see where the soft lesson was there, and I totally passed it up.
Mm.
Sometimes events are more complex or they have other elements to it too. But like when you ask yourself those questions, there's actual answers.
That's funny because I asked myself something slightly different, which is how did I create this?
Yeah.
I don't assume it was an intentional lesson, and sometimes the answer is something as simple as, well, the other day you were choosing to dwell on something negative like an idiot.
And then it manifested.
Yeah, exactly.
So you say how or why?
How did I create that?
How did I create it?
Like, what mental actions did I do that led to this? So either the beliefs or, affirmations or imaginings.
I see value to both questions, to at least just, putting time into that experimental kind of like thought process. Like, how did I create this? Why did I choose this? I feel like why did I choose this is really empowering, because then it helps me like lock in the idea that I do have my own agency.
Yeah, I think it's a lot more gentle. Yeah,
especially the way you just put that.
So like, how
That's
did I
funny.
fuck this
How
up?
did I fuck up this bad?
You can use those words as long as you're kind with them, I think. Moving on a little bit. When you have learned to your capacity in this in-between period, you are ready to progress. In the in-between period itself, however, has many dimensions of activity and divisions of experience. Goes on to say, instead of countries or physical divisions, you have psychological states. To an individual in one, another might seem quite foreign.
I really like the one phrase where Seth's just like, look, everybody doesn't just like know everybody, okay? Like there's different cliques.
Yeah.
You don't get to just be friends with every other entity.
It's funny, yeah, that he thought that was needed to be said, and probably did. I'm ready to skip to the next session unless you guys have anything. The time of choosing is somewhat more complicated if the last reincarnational cycle in your terms is completed. First of all, you must understand again that now you do not realize your true identity. You identify instead with your present ego. So when you think in terms of life after death, you really mean a future life of the ego that you know. At the end of the reincarnational cycle, you understand quite thoroughly that you, the basic identity, the inner core of your being, is more than the sum of your reincarnational personalities. Thought this is really interesting. Like that's exactly what we do, and that's why we fear death, But like when I hear Seth talking about like, oh, I'm not as connected with my reincarnational selves, like it has no resonance with like anything that we should be afraid of. And we can like, he is saying, one of his larger messages in all the books is like, we're building this bridge to the inner ego, the inner self, and we can start identifying with that self now. Right now we're the player in the video game, right? And we're like anguishing over this idea that our life is going to end, and it isn't necessarily even going to end in this context, but our larger identity is the player. We just have to remember we're like the larger person playing the video game.
Yeah. I don't know. I always find like, was that quote from like the beginning of the chapter?
Beginning of the session.
Yeah. The beginning of the sessions, I always like, my eyes glaze over a little bit when I'm reading them because I'm like, yeah, Seth, like get on with it. Like,
Yeah.
just like, you need to understand that reality. It's like, yeah, I get it.
Joe's gonna, in like a year's time, he's gonna have like read more of the books than we are. This is already getting old to him.
Oh, Seth just repeats himself so much. Yeah. It's like it bears repeating. It's like it doesn't bear repeating. It doesn't. I'm sorry.
Well, I think it's at the end of the session, maybe. He's talking about, we'll come back to the beginning, but I just want to jump out here.
Mhm.
As you read this book, the words are meant to release your own intuitional abilities. When you are reading it, your own dreams will give you added information and it will be in your mind upon waking if you are alert for them. There is no such simple end to the life that you know. Okay, and then he's just going to, the nature of this, but like this idea that like just coming across these ideas and, I'm jumping off this from here, like lamenting over him repeating himself, but he's up to something here. Like he's trying to change your beliefs. And I know for me, I need to hear some of these things over and over, like intellectually, I understand that he's repeating himself, but like to let them sink in at the belief level is like, this is helpful.
Mm.
So he talks about, the person, who is in their last cycle, basically, they have some different options.
Yeah, basically this session is like Seth's going to like set up a couple of different like vocations and sort of like describe them.
Yeah, so he's teacher, creator, and healer are the ones he mentions, and presumably there's others, but they're pretty broad categories.
And it seems like they can overlap a little bit too.
Yeah. Did you have any particular highlights, or we've talked about the teacher one a little bit?
We've talked about the teacher one a little bit. I just thought it was fun because we got a little bit of a Atlantis cameo in the teacher one.
That's
For
right.
all of you Atlantis fans out there, Atlantis confirmed. Seth said it. It's in here. I'll read it. Such a teacher must be able to instruct various portions of one entity in your terms at the same time. Say, for example, a particular entity has reincarnated in the 14th century, in 3 BC, in the year AD 260, and in the time of Atlantis. A teacher would simultaneously be in contact with these various personalities, communicating with them in terms that they could understand. Such communication demands a complete knowledge of the root assumptions of each era, or of such eras, and of the general philosophical and scientific climate of thought at the time. So, like, the larger point is that, like, if you're a teacher, you have to know, like, a lot about a lot of different, like, possible situations that your pupil would be in so that you can connect with them on sort of, like, this larger spiritual level.
Yeah.
And, like, all the different ways that they're trying to, like, do stuff.
Even if you have this, like, higher wisdom, you have to have this lower context to connect with people. Like, you probably understand this better than we do as a teacher.
Right.
Like, you have to, like, relate to the children you're teaching, right?
Yeah, and it comes up a lot in, like, the teaching that I do, too. Because, like, people will say this, like, generally about, like biases in, like, testing and stuff, but it's, like, there really is situations where, like, you will be very confused why a kid doesn't understand the assignment they're given.
Yeah.
And then you'll find out they just, like, don't know what a word means because, like, they live in an apartment and they didn't grow up with, like, a yard with, like, stuff in it, like, in the same way that, like, you did, And you're just like, oh, your context is just different, so, like, you can't relate to the material the same way that, like, the person who wrote it assumes you'd be able to,
I remember when I was starting my job, like 6 months into it, a lot of, like, the experienced staff that had worked there for decades, like, told me that I was a good teacher to the brand new staff. And it's because I just, like, had to, like, go through it and work through it mentally. It was just, like, I was just closer to their context where, like, the seasoned staff were just, like, so far beyond it. Like, their normal way of thinking, they just lost touch with that context. So it's very, very logical in that sense.
Yeah.
Do you, like, I know you just happen to be a teacher. Do you identify as a teacher, like, at a higher level? No?
I remember people telling me I should go into teaching, and I said for years, I swear I don't want to go into teaching. I don't want to do it.
Okay. Well, stay tuned. See if Joe ends up being a teacher his whole life.
Oh, God. No.
Others finished with their reincarnations and of a different overall nature may begin a long journey leading toward the vocation of a creator. On a much different plane, this can be compared to geniuses in creative fields within your own physical reality. Instead of paints, pigments, words, musical notes, the creator begins to experiment with dimensions of actuality, imparting knowledge in as many forms as possible, and I do not mean physical forms. What you would call time is manipulated as an artist would manipulate pigment. What you call space is gathered together in different ways. Goes on to say that one of their main preoccupations is to create beauty that impinges itself in as many various dimensions of reality as possible. It's always just fascinating. It's just kind of hard to wrap your mind around.
I thought it was such like a beautiful thing to sort of imagine, like the idea of like you could have an art piece that exists in like multiple dimensions at the same time as sort of like a reference point of just like there's this like point of beauty that like we can all agree is beautiful, but like in each reality is like a different type of thing, you know?
Yeah.
And like that in every one of them it can possess the quality of being beautiful is like a really cool idea.
Right. Yeah, because we've touched on a little bit, but this idea that what's more true is something that's true across more dimensions, you know?
Mhm.
Like that's just logical, but like, so this art is like coming from this higher level, but somehow has, I don't know if beauty just like automatically transcends like rote assumptions. Like, you know, we can go to a museum and we're like, we can be like struck by the beauty of something without like understanding why.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh no, when I was reading this part, I definitely got a lot of like Schopenhauer, like book 3 type stuff in it,
Yeah.
right? Where it's just like the enduring, like impossible to deny, like aesthetic appeal of the like beautiful, right?
Yep.
Where it's like we were talking earlier about like, oh, you know, we have to like get rid of this idea of evil and adopt like this stance of like good can exist without evil existing, and it's like this difficult sort of moral like negotiation that you need to do. But then it's like so interesting how like in the aesthetic field it's so present and direct that it's like impossible to deny, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So such an art is impossible to describe in words. The concept has no verbal equivalent. These creators, however, are involved in inspiring those in all levels of reality available to them. For example, inspiration in your system is often the work of such creators. That's really cool too. It's just this idea that like, you know, we're not just in this closed system, but like we're this interdimensional beauty is like inspiring our own works that like in their own level are like pulling the culture in the right direction. Hopefully.
Yeah.
It's very cool. And hint, hint, down at the bottom, well, maybe I should read some more there first. These art forms are often symbolic representations of the nature of reality. They will be interpreted in various ways according to the abilities of those who perceive them. In your terms, they may be living dramas. They will always be psychic structures, however, existing apart from any given system of reality, but at least partially perceived by many. Some exist in what you might term the astral plane, and you perceive them in visits during the sleep state. Others are perceived in glimpses or bits and pieces by your temporal mind while you are half sleeping, half waking, or in other periods of disassociation. And then the hint, the whole Christ story was such a creation.
That's what I was saying.
You're on to it.
It's like it's a whole art collective. It's performance art.
Yeah. And then finally, healers. Do you guys, you went to med school. Do you identify as a healer, or is that a wrong track for you?
I identify more as a teacher now, funny enough.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that makes sense because you're deep into this stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and to what extent are these all kind of like overlapping, you know?
That's the thing. If what Seth says is true, that all disease comes from unresolved mental issues, then
Yeah.
to teach is to heal. To teach this material specifically would be to heal.
Yeah. So I was really trying to like make a distinction when I was like, do you understand what he's meant by healers here? Like beyond just helping people with their beliefs?
It says the healing involved is always psychic and spiritual, and these healers are available to help each personality in your system as you know it in your present time and in other systems. It sort of reminded me of like earlier in this chapter, like we were talking about like sometimes people get like super disoriented like after death, and they have to have like somebody there to do a little bit of counseling for them to kind of like work them through some of their like shit. Like to me that seems more of like a healer thing than like a teacher thing, you know?
Yeah, we can just point to our own, you know, therapists and psychologists as like this kind of hybrid between a teacher and a healer, right?
Right.
they're healing with words. That was the whole revolution of psychology.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Where it's like they're not necessarily giving you new information. They're more allowing you to sort of like unravel the whatever's going on with yourself in like in a psychological way.
Maybe a healer is more often like a one-on-one thing, where like a teacher, like a Seth, he's just giving this information to a broad general audience, but a healer is going to address your specific issue and like give you some similar information, but codified for what you have to deal with, if that makes sense.
I don't know. The way he was talking about teachers seemed really specific too. It's like you have to address like all of their different personalities,
Yeah, you have to have this broad background to like relate to the context. But yeah, at some point, I don't know if it's worth like even trying to make the distinction. That's about it. Do you guys have anything else here? It says, unfortunately, the words fail to describe many of the basics that I would have you understand. You have within yourself, however, the ability to release your intuitions and to receive inner knowledge. When I was talking about like how he's implying that reading these sessions like helps change your beliefs, like I've been reading the early sessions, book 7, and he's talking about the psychedelic experience. So like, using substances like acid or mushrooms or something, and he's relating it basically to reading these sessions. Like you can have the same sort of like spiritual progress going either of these routes, and there's definitely advantages and disadvantages to each. So
I remember when we first started reading through this, we talked about how like books are like weird hyper objects too in this philosophy, where it's like they're all each instantiations of the same object, but just like in different physical locations.
In what sense? Like, just because there's many of the same book?
There's many of the same book. It's all the same book, but it's somehow the same book, but it's in 100 different places.
I thought you were saying like all the books deliver the same message, but we're kind of back to that like context, like.
Well, because I remember like we talked about, wasn't there a thing where it was like when you're reading through the book, it's somehow like it's not always like the same or something?
Yeah,
I forgot if that was a Seth thing or that was just a thing that we were going off on.
But I think either way, it's probably both. Yeah, but like you're always different when you read it, and like you're bringing different things, and these ideas strike you differently. I mean, I've read some of these books several times.
Yeah,
probably this one more than anything.
No, there are some ideas that you just need to kind of get hit in the head with and until it gets through.
You can go through and you're like, how did I not get blown away by this quote before, and why did I think this one was so great? It's kind of a humble brag to say that like, yeah, this stuff that I'm writing is gonna like completely rearrange your reality,
Yeah, reading my book's basically like doing drugs. It's that mind altering.
I don't know, I'm kind of on board. I drank the Seth Kool-Aid. All right, guys, till next time, huh?
Till next time.
Yep.
See you later, dear listener. Goodbye.
That's our show, but fear not, the never-ending conversation continues next week. If you're enjoying the show, please be so kind as to subscribe, like, rate, and review, and if you're feeling frisky, tell a friend. Contact us at implicatingthereal@gmail.com. You can support the show at patreon.com/implicatingthereal. We are doing our best, but whatever support you can lend helps us appreciably. We are not affiliated with the publishers or proprietors, but we encourage you to get the books. You can follow along as we endeavor to dive deep into the Sethian worldview, and there's really nothing like cultivating your own relationship with the material. Until next week, we wish you a fond good evening.